Good morning to you. Good morning to you. Let's get started. This is Coffee and Chat with Rev Bruce knocking us out. Once again, we're talking about chocolate cities, and particularly chocolate city commerce. Chocolate city commerce. What the funk happened to chocolate city commerce, right? And I'll say that as a nod to George Clinton and the P Funk fan, Parliament Funkadelic. I've been a long time fan of that since childhood. But 1975, they came out with Chocolate City, which um, spoke in an elaborate way about what chocolate cities meant for African Americans at that time. It's a source of pride. And where do we stand now as far as chocolate cities? Where do we stand now as far as chocolate cities being the meccas of black culture and commerce? Where do we stand now with chocolate cities? And I want to get into this simply to address some major issues with how we arrived at these chocolate cities forming, and then where they stand now, and what are some of the factors to the commerce within these chocolate cities and where they stand now. So when I look at this, the chocolate city was based upon the 1970 census. The 1970 census broke out that the high water mark, per se, for a chocolate city back then was over 70% Negro. Negro. Okay. We got a lot of name changes going on, but over 70% Negro was a chocolate city. That's according to Goodbye to Chocolate City from the DC Policy Center, put out by uh, David Rusk. And I want to say that was um, from DC Policy Center. David Rusk put that out there. And I'll share that in the comments. That was an interesting article that broke down a lot of stuff that some of us may not even recognize that's going on in the economic development and urban planning of our cities that count both coming and going, right? There are factors that count both coming into it and moving forward with it that make a big difference. And so David Rusk uh, with the DC Policy Center, he put that out, Goodbye Chocolate City, remarking on what became known later as not so much DC, but DC Metro area, right? For those of us that understand, DC went through some things back then that got it labeled DC Metro to encapsulate part of the surrounding areas within Maryland, particularly. But here goes the thing: what's going on in DC right now? Think about that, and then think about how at that time, 1975, with what George Clinton was putting out there, DC was the most prominent chocolate city at that time. And look where we are now, uh, with the government being involved and doing some things locally with DC Metro. So our chocolate cities are based upon this great migration from the South. People were moving from the South to both the North, right? Chicago, Detroit, DC, other areas, as well as the West, Los Angeles, right? Seattle, okay? Different things were happening in different areas, and people were moving. Oakland, the Bay Area, okay? So now people have moved, and there's this influx of Black populations in certain cities and concentrations, which become cultural hubs. Chicago, New York, Detroit. These become cultural hubs, and not just for, work, but we bring lifestyle with us. We bring culture. We bring food. We bring all of that with us. And so sometimes we want to taste it down home to come along with where we're moving forward, and all that comes with us. And so that's what this migration did in order to create these chocolate cities. Flip forward from that. Now, what's happened? Well, I think one of the biggest things that's happened has been the way municipal government takes care of business. Let's just take it like that. The way municipal government takes care of business. I've been to the San Diego, California area, which is to say there's a layer of liberalism that overshadows the racism. There's a layer of liberalism that overshadows the racism. And I say that because that's how municipal government works in San Diego. And that's how it tends to go in surrounding areas. And then the further you might go east, right? The further you might go east, it becomes less of a liberal layer. The further you go north, the terminology may change. Well, because the concentration of Black folks has changed, right? The concentration of people of color has changed. Then you get somewhere like Escondido versus Encinitas. That's going to be an impact because of how policy is going to impact based upon how people arrive in your city, stay in your city, and conduct business in your city. That's what local policy does. And so politics, local policy, all those are factors in maintaining a cultural community as well. And we act like that's not true, but it is. So what happened to these chocolate cities? Gentrification, economic policies, economic decline, right? When industries shut down and people are laid off, towns dependent upon those industries, they fall apart. They don't see any robust growth. That's where challenges come into play. And so these factors pushed a lot of what comes negatively into what we call local or municipal policies that don't help people of color. Gentrification. And you'll see that appear more and more often, but that's one of the factors that knocked out chocolate cities, was this idea of gentrification and local economies, and it tearing and ripping apart what we would consider the broader culture and social fabric of these chocolate cities, right? And so look what's happened to Detroit. Look what's happened to Chicago as far as Black business and Black economic development. I'm not saying go way back in decades of history. Look at it now. When was the last time you visited and saw what's going on in the black community in these areas, right? If it wasn't for some famous celebrities having restaurants, eateries, and hotspot entertainment spots, you may not have tourism in these black communities. Harlem is an exception because Harlem has been able to, curtail its history. Watts has been able to reshape its history and tell a lot of stories about what's occurred over time in its area. But if we don't train our representatives of our communities to do this in a proper manner and to shape it to where tours can be given of these cities, we're going to be looking around and wondering what happened later on. And not just to these cities, but other cities that have it coming as well. Nobody's immune to this. And let's get this right. And so there's some other factors that come along with this. And one of the things I want to share is on the list of problems, for black businesses in these cities as well as other cities, two words are going to continuously come up: disparities and displacement. Disparities and displacement. You'll have disparities that deal with cultural bias. You'll have disparities that deal with economic bias. You'll have disparities that deal with health. Come on, health factors. The black business owner is more likely to be unhealthy or less healthy than their typical business owner. And so what happens? Insurance rates for black business owners as they get older become different. The health coverage is a challenge. And so if you're struggling to make ends meet, you're going to cut back on some of these things. And when you cut back on some of these things for yourself as a business owner, you run the risk of cutting short your own life because you have no health care. And so that's why certain policies are in place for minority and small business owners. That's why certain policies are in place for black-owned business owners nationally, regionally, right? In your local area, there might be certain things in place just for those individuals because of federal block grants, or you might be dealing with some stuff that's coming from a past issue that now has become an initiative, right? When you've mistreated folks and been sued for it, and then you've got to make up for it, now it becomes an initiative rather than an issue. God bless. So looking at this, now take into consideration what's happening with black business in some of these prominent chocolate cities. Look at this. This is Atlanta. This is DC. This is Chicago. And this is Detroit. Atlanta, DC, Chicago, Detroit. And look at them. Look at them side by side. Atlanta nearly doubles the amount of black-owned businesses as Detroit currently, right? And this is a chart combining numerous sources of information. But even for what it lacks, look at what it has. And it has Atlanta nearly doubling the amount of black-owned businesses as Detroit. And even at this point, with things getting as bad as they've gotten in Detroit. I didn't think it was that bad. Yes, Atlanta is a black mecca. It's surging still, but man, what happened to the chocolate city commerce? That Detroit has just over 8,000 black-owned businesses compared to where it once stood. What's happening in these cities? What's happening in these economies? What's happening with the economic development? Because if it's at a standstill, you'd have trouble squeezing in, and if it's at a standstill, you'll have trouble sustaining yourself and surviving. So you got to look at what's happening here, right? Chicago, even though it's not the lowest, you can see there's a difference between a Chicago or a DC and an Atlanta, right? Chicago's still on that lower end. And I really question, policy-wise, how each of these cities or areas are making it lucrative to start and launch a small business, particularly as a minority, in their communities, maybe for another time. So ask this. We look at the top factors impacting, black businesses, particularly in these areas. Like I said, disparities are going to come up a lot. Look at this. Disparities in access to government contracts. Who has control of that? The government, right? Economic disparity. There's a gap between the black business community and the competitive and challenging conditions that exist beyond just the black business community. How do we get a leg up? How do we get, more training, more support? Boom. Commercial rent and property taxes, right? Not only do we have to close in some cases we have to relocate, go somewhere else. And if we're dependent upon foot traffic and everything, you got to leave a sign up there. Hey, we've moved. This is our new location. But a lot of stuff that's forcing you to have a trickle down impact on your business. More disparities in funding, right? And how funds are distributed to minority owned businesses. And we've got to stop thinking as minority owned businesses as just people of color and realize what the glossary for business is saying about minority, right? Does that include disabled? Does that include women-owned businesses? Does that include veteran-owned businesses, right? The minority. Who are the minorities? Does that include those who have, temporary homelessness experiences? Does that include those who are coming back from the prison and the reentry system? Who's classified as a minority according to SBA? Can you figure that out? Can you find that out? Can you research that? Because that will tell you who your real competition for some of this funding is. And so if you're going up against, let's put the example out there. Let's say you're going up against a woman-owned business that has 30% veterans representing the organization, and of those veterans, 50% of those veterans are disabled veterans. You're looking at actually some factors that can cause this other competitor to be here and you to be here when there are evaluations of your application. Because, hey, she's checking off numerous boxes that make us as a lender look like we're really doing something. That's what that's about. And so when we take all this in, and we're asking the question, what happened? What the funk happened to Chocolate City commerce? Part of it is we got away from supporting Black businesses the way we used to. Yes, part of it is on us. What happened to Chocolate City commerce is on us as African Americans, on us as residents, on us as fellow business owners, on us as those who were supporting the business at one time with our patronage, right? Now, we've got to ask, what are we doing to bring back and rebuild and reshape Chocolate City commerce? What are we doing to do that? How do you make a comeback in Detroit? You know, under these conditions, how do you make a comeback in DC under the current conditions? How do you bounce back in New Orleans after Katrina? Do we ever simply get the input and wisdom of those who have done it, tried it, and survived it, and are still doing it? Or do we think we don't need that? We don't need to know that because we got it. I don't know, but we need something going on here because this is killing us economically. And as it kills us economically, it's going to begin to kill us socially. It's going to eat away at our communities in ways that we don't understand, that we haven't seen before. There are a lot of examples from other cultures that we could look at and see how to know what to prevent and how to know what to embrace and start building upon. Have you ever wondered, and I'll say this, completely as an observant traveler, have you ever wondered LA, San Francisco, New York, even when I went to Vancouver some years ago, there's always a Chinatown. And the beauty of Chinatown is you're going to get inundated with different dialects of Chinese language. You're going to be inundated with images of Chinese culture. It's all right there. You know what you're walking into when you walk in San Francisco, when you walk through those gates in Chinatown. But what I appreciated about Chinatown, particularly in San Francisco, spending some time there and looking at the commerce, is in Chinatown, Bank of America looks different. In Chinatown, the stores look different that are even of major grocers. Why? Because Chinatown says there's a particular image it wants to portray or espouse. And when you go to Bank of America in Chinatown, it looks like a ancient Chinese structure. When you go to certain stores in Chinatown, there are in an edifice that is structured based upon ancient Chinese architecture. And so you still may be doing business with Bank of America, but you know good and well that Bank of America has come into an agreement with Chinatown and its Chamber of Commerce and whoever else on how they're going to show up in Chinatown. Are we doing that in DC? Are we doing that in Oakland? Are we doing that in Atlanta? We need to figure that out and figure out how Chinatown gets it done and gets away with it and makes it happen in preserving their culture. If we're not careful, we're going to be leading to an extinction of our own culture, of our own chocolate cities, right before our eyes. Hey, this is Rev Bruce talking about supporting Black businesses in Black Business Month. We're wrapping it up. God bless. We'll keep the conversation going. Peace.